right, welcome back to Gigs, everybody. Get into game streams this week or month, really, because it's a monthly show. This month, we have an awesome group of designers from Volition. I've known these guys for years. They're all geniuses. So I wanted to first off start by thanking them for being here and giving us all advice and feedback. And now I'm going to let them introduce themselves, starting with Jameson.
Hello, I'm Jameson Doral. I have been in the industry for 15 years now. I graduated from Full Sail in 2001. From there, I went to a couple of startups and had a couple of fun experiences before getting my job at Oddworld, where I worked on Stranger's Wrath. Then I went to work at Electronic Arts, where I worked on the 2 Godfather games and the Simpsons game. And for the last 8 years, I've been at Volition, where I worked on Red Faction Armageddon, and then a bunch of stuff I can't talk about yet.
Me next?
Go, Rusty, go.
All right. Hi, I'm Rusty Samrat. Graduated from Full Sail in March of 2006, and I started out working at Midway in Austin as a designer, and then transitioned into the role of a technical designer there. And then after Midway, I went and worked at Sony Online in Austin as well for a bit on the DC Universe project. Did technical design work there as well, and then moved to Volition here. Been at Volition for 6 years. Worked on Saints Row the Third, and then worked on a lot of our tools and technology, as well as some stuff that I cannot talk about. So that's a bit about me.
Cool. I'm Will Fitzgerald. I started making web games in '09. None of them were good. Went to school at Full Sail 2012, right at 4 years ago now, for the Master of Science in Game Design. Had a computer information systems undergrad, and did flight sim, did some mobile. Started at Volition about a year ago, and this is my first like AAA design role, so I've only got a year of that. And I've been modding since about 2004, which is always a hobby of mine. And then I reached out to these guys and was like, "Hey, here's my mods. This is what I do. Can I talk to you guys?" And anyway, long story short, they gave me a shot, and here I am.
All right, awesome. Well, you may have seen a trend here. Yes, we are all men. Yes, they all work at Volition, but also they all went to Full Sail. And that's actually how I met all of these guys. So, I thought it would be cool to kind of bring a group together who all went to Full Sail all at different times. I graduated in 2008. And kind of talk about being a designer in games. Now, I was a designer for a few years, but this panel is really about these guys. So I'm going to be asking questions and letting them talk. You guys have watched me. I can't not talk. But it's mostly going to be a conversation with those guys. So with that being said, we'll get into the first question. So the first group here are all from Facebook. So thank you for everybody who asked questions on Facebook. If you're not watching now, hopefully you are watching later. Robin Coman asked, what level of scripting ability do designers need to develop?
Rusty?
I think increasingly so. It's really important. It's always been very valuable. There's still a lot of places that there's going to be a role, or not a role, but a phase of a project where you are doing some paper design, but that is only a phase of a project at best, and at some point, more than likely, you're going to need to be able to do some scripting. So that's one part of it, and then the other part is that I think being able to do the scripting is really important for kind of providing context, or even if you are doing any documentation or speccing or planning, you need to kind of be grounded and have an understanding of what it will take to translate that to game. So I think it's pretty important at just about any place you're going to go. There would be varying degrees of the proficiency that might be expected or required, but at a core level, it's kind of foundational, I think.
One of the things to add to that is how much easier scripting is these days with visual scripting engines, and most places have been developing that. On the last 3 engines I've worked, proprietary engines, we've had a visual scripting language, and all the base logic is the same, but it's way easier to kind of pick up and kind of understand and work with.
Cool. All right, next question. Chad Coop asked, how much do you guys have to interact with design documentation? What do you feel makes good documentation? He would ask that question.
Early on, too much. Like we're always documenting things. That the problem is, as soon as you write it, it becomes outdated. And the biggest difficulty that I've seen in my career is trying to figure out when is a doc still valid, and like, because most of the time I'll just go talk to the person about it and find out, is this something I still need to read? Does it need to be updated? That kind of thing.
Having a separation and documentation between like specs and goals. Like we have something here, and I'm sure other places have similar things, like a design brief where it's more about the emotional goals and stuff like of a given design. Those are less likely to go out of date quickly because they're more high level intentionally, and it's more to be kind of like the box you're kind of going to be operating within, and some of the targeted goals, but not the specifics of how you will get there. But as soon as you're talking about something that's a spec, or well, really a spec's not necessarily always going to be true. If it's a system spec, that might actually live on for a while, but certainly like mission specs and stuff like that, like Jameson said, pretty much just the minute you finish it, you're already out of date. So we try to balance how much time we invest in those for sure.
And as for me, these two guys are principal level, so they write more documentation than I do. I write a bit, but for me, it's all about implementation. I just receive the documentation and use it to implement what I do. So as an entry-level designer that needs to implement things, that is core to every single day of my work here.
Yeah, what's interesting is I've seen documentation done differently. We use it a lot more here than anywhere else I've been, but it's because we're a very systems-heavy game. Fortnite is a very systems-heavy game, and so it's hard to communicate systems in more of an emotional sense, and you really have to break down like the math and stuff like that. But same thing, it's pretty outdated pretty quickly. You guys probably all remember writing design docs for Full Sail. How would you say those are different than what you write now?
Well, for me, that was so long ago. We didn't really have examples of good design docs then, and most of the stuff we were doing was it was either very high level or very technical, because like we were either talking at a high level about what we wanted to make, or we were describing what we were coding, since our program was very programming centric. I think really kind of where you're at now is the docs. The early ones, like Rusty was talking about, like the brief, are very high level, and then as you get further, it kind of goes a meld of those two things. Where I think the spec is kind of like an in between, where it's that doc has to tell people exactly what they need to know to make the right decisions. And when we were doing those docs at Full Sail, we were writing them for ourselves, not for other people, for the most part. So it was a little bit different in kind of the approach that we were taking.
Yeah, I don't really think I have anything to add to that. My experience was kind of the same thing with the either very high level kind of creative, character drafts or story draft kind of stuff, and then like the technical design document was, like you said, pretty much verbatim what we're coding. So yeah, for me, the kind of like what you were saying a second ago, Grant, like when you're in a very systems-heavy environment, that documentation is very valid, and also one of the parts that I had to learn over time that I can't honestly recall that I wrote any docs like this when I was at Full Sail, but the interface of that system into other systems is one of the most important things in my mind to kind of make sure is very clear, because there's the details of how the system's going to work, but a big part of that is most systems are going to talk to other systems, and having that clearly defined and documented is really valuable for a team environment for the other people who are going to be working on those things that need to communicate with your stuff. So that's a very important part to kind of like not just make sure it's present, but invest wisely in.
For me, there was only one class that really taught me design documentation, and that was under Robin Coleman, who I believe gave us the first question. And everything she taught me is pretty straight up what I do now. Like the way I write it, the way I receive it from other people. Yeah, at least so when I was there, I was taught a certain way, and then that's certainly the way I've experienced it ever since.
Ganesh asked a follow-up to the scripting question. What are the most common scripting languages in the industry? C#, Lua, Python. Those are some of the examples that he gave. Like, what do you guys use?
So For tools related stuff, Python is pretty popular. We use a lot of Python here for tool stuff, but we don't use any of that for a game. We have our own visual scripting for games, scripting. I think across the industry, there are definitely a decent amount of proprietary, even still text-based or visual-based. Obviously, with the prevalence of like Unreal, Blueprint is a very common one that a lot of people are familiar with, and there's a lot of documentation and training tutorials for, so it's very easy to do. And then with Unity also being popular, C# certainly is something that a lot of people are familiar with because that's the most commonly used thing when using Unity. So I'd say C#, Blueprint for visual scripting is the most prevalent, but as Jameson said earlier, a lot of the principles of visual scripting are going to be the same. It'll just be, some different syntax, some different node definitions, but the general flow will be kind of consistent.
Yep. I work in our visual scripting system every day as I implement. I also work in UE4 multiple evenings a week, and that is absolutely true. And with all the modding I've done and all the proprietary engines I've touched through the AAA industry, I can say a large number of AAA studios are specifically using visual scripting at this point. There's not code to be written. It is certainly visual.
I mean, there's really no reason not to, right? Like, it gives you everything that you're trying to accomplish in a form that's much more error-proof and easier to understand and easier for others to understand what you're doing. Like, it's way easier to sift through nodes and kind of follow along than it is to kind of, like, dig through code and kind of find out what someone's trying to do.
Yep.
Yeah, for sure. Rusty, I forgot to tell you, we don't talk about Unity on this stream.
Fair.
I'm kidding. But thanks for the UE4 plug, guys. It's pretty good.
Is it still a thing? They just sort of phase. I don't know.
Okay. Next question. Seth Rolfe asked, there are several different roles a designer can fill in the game industry. How do I know which one I should shoot for? I enjoy level design, but I can find the fun in all aspects of design work.
That is a really good question. I think at a very broad level, it comes down to if you want to tinker with numbers or if you want to build things. And like whenever I am very much a level design background guy. My experience, I think in 3 dimensions. Like whenever I'm thinking about the experience, I don't want to sit with a spreadsheet. I want to think about how it's laid out in the experience that I'm creating. And actually, when I work in an editor, I tend to do a lot of like first-person building, so I'm moving around and kind of placing things and not using top-down or side views and things like that. So there's kind of that level of things, and then there's the guys who focus on the inner workings, the bits that kind of come together, the tuning of numbers and those kind of things, which is something that a lot of people that kind of move toward that side of design are very passionate about, and they care about those little tweaks that make big differences. And for someone for me, I just hand me that thing and let me know that it works and tell me how I should utilize it so that I can make something cool with it. So for me, that's kind of the general. There's way more breakdown inside of that, but that's kind of like the top level distinction in my head.
Yeah, I agree with that. I sometimes think of it as sort of 2 levels. At the highest level, there still is 3 kind of tracks. One is systems design, very numbers heavy. One is going to be scripting, which is very logic and sequential thinking. And then, of course, there's level design. And those are the 3 kind of primary, like high-level tracks. And then within each of those, there are, of course, other specializations, especially with mobile and free-to-play and all the way that changes the design. There are a lot of specialty roles on the systems design side now around monetization and things like that. So those are always things you can think about. But I think kind of understanding where you fall at that high level in one of those kind of 3 tracks might help you kind of focus where you want to invest your learning and your time, even though those in themselves can branch out into multiple different roles. But kind of understanding where you fall on that in terms of interest is probably a good kind of frame.
One thing I failed to mention when I introduced myself, before I came here, I was actually in a career placement position where I helped people get in the game industry and simulation and casino, wherever they wanted to go. I tried to help. And so I worked with a lot of recruiters. I worked with a lot of designers to try to place designers. And just as a side note to this, level design always seemed to be the most entry level. So if level design is your skill set, that makes sense. But man, when level design is coupled with scripting, that's the money right there. Like systems design isn't really entry level. Systems design is what I do here, by the way, so I'm very fortunate that I got to do that. But yeah, like if you're a level designer and that's what you love, that's great. You really should have a specialization. Please have a specialization, in my opinion. But if you can demonstrate that you can implement really well, not just placement, not just making things aesthetically pleasing is key. Understanding pacing and flow in your level, of course, but being able to really implement all of that, awesome. At least here, that's what we look for when we hire is can you implement everything that you design. They've made me. I go from paper prototype all the way to complete polish implementation, all me. A programmer is not helping me. That is all me. And if you can be that kind of designer, you will have a lot of success.
Yeah, and to be clear, I did not verbalize that, but yeah, scripting is a huge part of what I have to do. You're right. Like being able to go from conception to completion on your own, or as much as possible on your own, is huge. And as a level designer, you have to be able to actually build what you're talking about and let someone experience it for sure.
So a follow-up to that same person, Seth. Follow-up is, should I tailor my portfolio to that one role, or is it better to showcase a broader view of my skills?
I'm curious what you guys are going to say about this, because I feel like you should absolutely specialize. The way that I talk to people about, especially when you're trying to present yourself, is I am looking to hire an expert. So like I have a role to fill, and I want to fill that role with the best possible person for that role. If you have skills that can branch outside of that, that's great. That's something to talk about in the interview once you're in the door, that kind of stuff. But for me, like making yourself look like the best system designer or the best level designer or the best writer or the best technical designer, that's what I want to see if I'm looking at a resume or a portfolio personally.
Yeah, I would agree with that. The only thing I would add to that would be volume might be a modifier on that. So show what you're specializing in, like Jameson was saying, but if you have a lot of examples, at the point where you have a lot of examples and they might be somewhat redundant, just variations on the same thing, that might be a chance for you to filter in some other things to show breadth. But if you're only going to have a couple of examples, like say 3 or 4, then making sure they're pretty focused is good. If you're going to have 10 examples, making 10 examples of the same specialty is diminishing returns, so being able to branch out there might have some value, but it just kind of depends on how much in terms of volume you have to put in your portfolio.
Yeah, my portfolio was certainly systems focused, and I branded myself as that, even when I didn't have any AAA experience yet doing so. But what I did it in my cover letter, in the summary on my resume, and in like the About Me page on my portfolio. I mentioned how me being in production before that made me a better systems designer, and I showcased how some of the other scripting I had done made me a better systems designer, and the level design I did, how that made me a better level designer. So even if I had things that made me have a broader portfolio, the front and heavy stuff was still very systems, and then every single thing that wasn't systems, in just a couple quick points, like literally bullet points, one line long, nothing crazy, tied it right back into systems and why that made me better and why that made me better. And yeah, it worked for me.
Cool. So I had a kind of a follow-up here to the scripting things from James Torres. I'm really weak at scripting. No matter how hard I try, I can't seem to retain it. How badly is that going to affect my chances of finding work?
I'm curious what that's kind of a vague thing. I'm curious what kind of scripting he's trying. Is he trying visual scripting, right? Because like I mentioned before, that's something that's much easier to kind of pick up and use. And but the truth is, like all the foundational stuff is the same. It's about understanding, how these things work together and what you can accomplish with them. It might be that he's not trying the right kinds of things to get familiar with it. He might need different, like he maybe needs video tutorials to use to kind of get acclimated to it, or maybe needs a tutor, right? Like it's about first learning at a basic level how to do it, and then from that point on, it becomes easier to kind of learn new things and kind of build upon that.
Yeah, I agree, because there's like there's two very different aspects of, say, visual scripting. Just to get specific with it, there's knowing what nodes exist, remembering what nodes exist to do the things you want to do, knowing what reusable pieces of compound functionality or complex functionality have already been, wrapped up into a single node, so you don't have to do all that yourself. That's a whole mind space that does have to be kind of built up, and knowledge that you learn given what you're working with. And then there's more logic-based, like how you break down a problem, how you subdivide that and tackle the parts that you're going to be working on, how you debug it when it's not working correctly. So that would be a question I would want to further understand is it the actual achieving what you set out to implement and getting it to actually work? Is that the struggle, or is it the next time you come back to it, I can't remember the name of the node, or I can't remember which node does what kind of thing, because those are two separate questions. But if the logic itself is a big challenge, then
So James jumped in. And said, "I learn it fine, then I forget it." My suggestion is you just got to keep plowing through it.
Yeah.
You just got to keep doing it over and over and over and over again. Because look, I was not great when I started coding, and I just did it over and over again. If that isn't working, then maybe try a different way of doing scripting. I wouldn't say you're screwed. You could look into systems design maybe, but so I jumped in there. So.
No, that's great. That's a great point. And I would also add to that, if you haven't tried this before with something that you've completed and then you found you forgot later, try revisit it sooner, so that way it doesn't flush your short-term memory. And try, instead of just always implementing something new, refactor something that you've already done. So a lot of times you'll get something working and you can come back to it a week or two later and be like, oh, this is horrible. Why did I do it this way? I made this way harder on myself than it needed to be. And so just revisiting the same code might help to alleviate some of the burden of forgetfulness, but then you're still kind of in the thought process and going through the motions. So try refactoring things. Make it better.
So I wasn't educated on programming formally like you guys were, and I had tremendous trouble learning how to script. Like, I could write pseudocode really well. Like, I was logical. I could see it. I could be like, okay, I could create a function over here that does this set of tasks for me. I could call it. Like, I got the basics. And I went through so many tutorials on, like, Codecademy and just all the things, especially when I was in grad school at Full Sail, and I could not get it. And this, not until I really got involved with visual scripting did the light bulb go off. And Kismet with UDK was the first time I successfully started writing logic, like in a, I'd say, relatively impressive way, not like generic hello world stuff. And anyway, I got pretty decent at visual scripting, and that turned back into, now I really understand how to write logic. Now I can go back to C# and Unity. I was huge into Unity back then, and it made more sense. So for me, at least, I was at a huge mental block, and I'm still a little afraid of it, to be honest. I don't like writing real code. I'm very, very comfortable with visual scripting, and that's certainly where I prefer to stay, but I couldn't do it at all until my practices in visual scripting helped me become that much stronger. So if you're a student and your school is having you stick with code, like Unity, C# kind of stuff, really try to find time to poke at Blueprint. Unreal 4 is completely free. I would strongly recommend trying it. And if you're a PC gamer, seriously look at the games you own on Steam and look at what modding kits are there, because a lot of them have really nice visual scripting systems as well.
Yeah, and just I'll plug UE4 a little bit more. There are a lot of good examples of how to use it, as well as Unreal Tournament is completely open, so you can pull that down and look at how a real AAA game is using the engine. So.
Reverse engineering is very powerful. And one of the great things about Unreal Tournament, as an example, is not only can you look at the scripts, but you can just look at the levels and how they're constructed. And that can also be a really good thing for kind of just learning level design patterns or structure of game objects, because there's a lot that goes into making a level that you obviously don't see when you're playing it.
Yep.
So understanding the complexity and all the layers of things from collision and types of things that have to be somewhat refined or massaged behind the scenes to make it play well is good to understand.
That modding kit's been available for months, if not over a year now. And again, free. No excuse for people to not be in there, unless I guess their PC can't handle it. But Yeah.
All right, move on to some more questions here. So JD always asks a bunch of great questions. Thank you. And so his first one is, what makes up a game designer portfolio, and how should you start one if you don't have one already?
So I get that question a lot, and the thing that I always recommend is to first of all start designing, like design something and kind of document your process. On top of just having like the examples of the work, I usually recommend like start a blog and talk through like, here's the thing I'm trying to accomplish, here's what I did, here's the roadblocks that I found, here's how I worked around it. Like, what's really important and is almost impossible to get out of talking to a designer or seeing representation of their work is the thought process and how they handle problems, and that's like the most important thing to know whenever I want to bring a designer on board, is I need to know kind of like how they'll approach a problem, how they'll work with the team, and just make sure that like a basic level of understanding is there for the kind of things that we would need them to do.
Anybody else? All right, we'll go on to the next
question. One thing. And this is what I was told 100 times when I was still new. You want to design games, go design games. You want to be a game developer, go develop games. Like, everyone gets overwhelmed trying to put a team together, trying to make everything work, and man, just make a design is what I normally tell. And this is why you will hear me mention modding constantly. Just go make experiences. The first few are going to be bad, but just do it. Like, you need to do it. Yeah. But it's that easy. People think it's way complicated, and they can't figure out how to get started. You like, I don't know, Left 4 Dead. Go make a level in Left 4 Dead. Go mess around with how zombies spawn. Any game. Like, there's just so many games you can do that in. You like Halo. If you're more of a console gamer, go use their Forge. Make some levels. They're probably going to suck. Doesn't matter. Play them with your friends. Iterate. Show that iteration through a blog like Jameson said, or just through the pieces of the portfolio anyway. But all of this adds up. And it's how at least I started, and a lot of people I know started. So we take kindly to that. And I can understand how difficult it is. And when I see that, I'd be happy to always get feedback and stuff. So, yeah.
So a bunch of questions about mods, so I'm going to kind of sum them up into one big one, and then we'll kind of hit on them. Mods versus games for designer, pros and cons. When making a mod, is that something I should put in my portfolio? Just in general, like, are mods a good way for me to learn to be a better designer?
Yes.
Yes.
All of those things. So for some people, especially people who are trying to get into the industry like we're talking about here, mods may be the only way you have to demonstrate what you're capable of. It might be the only like actual physical thing that you can give me and let me experience, and it's very valuable, especially if like I mentioned before, if I can play through it and then have something to refer to that shows me kind of why you made decisions you did. That's a really good way to kind of get that information across.
I don't need it.
Okay.
Will, you're the mod expert. What do you have to say about mods, man?
Dude, I could talk about this the rest of the hour.
You don't get it. You get it like a minute.
Okay.
You have a lot of questions.
Oh gosh. A big principle to understand here is, like, first time I met Jameson, and he probably doesn't remember this because he had no idea who I was. He came to Full Sail. I was a student, whatever, and I was like, dude, I've got these mobile games, and he was like, dude, we don't make mobile games. And I was like, oh, that's a good point. I don't care about these mobile games I'm making because you're an open world sandbox studio by your history, at least. So, maybe open world sandbox mods will catch their interest more. Guess what? When I came here to interview, my Skyrim mods were like the most popular thing that I got interviewed about all day long. They did not care about most of my portfolio, but they drilled me on my Skyrim mods. And yeah, that's yes, just all the. Anyway, my contact information will be here, and please send me questions after this. I will love to go deeper into all this.
So kind of a follow up. Since we're talking about portfolios, we'll stick on the portfolio questions for a bit. Tom Toady asks, do you make a portfolio to show a team the talent they need, or do you make a portfolio to show the talent you focus on, or both? I would say both, if you have that much portfolio to show. But what do you guys think?
Yeah, I would agree. I would say both. But with I think your cover letter and what you present and what you focus and send them to is probably going to be where you'll be specific about the job or the company that you're applying for.
Yeah.
Yep.
Come on, guys.
No, it's good. It's good. We have a lot of questions, so it's fine to just get through them quickly. So how do you write a cover letter that, or even just a resume that distinguishes you as a design candidate? It's a little bit different. So we covered this in an earlier stream, and Chris, I know you asked this, and I'm pretty sure you've watched it, but more as a designer, what can you say in a cover letter or in a resume that's going to make you stand out from the other people who are trying to break in as a designer?
So for me, everyone talks about what they did, and that's kind of the obvious thing. But if you can explain to me how you did it, and maybe even why you did it with your design decisions, and just so like you're on your resume, you're talking about this game project, you've got these bullet points. Those bullet points always say what you did, but rarely do I see them say how you did it, and more rarely why you did it. And that's a lot to cram into a bullet point by all means. So some of that can go into the cover letter, and all of that should be on the portfolio. But when I notice that is exactly what speaks to me. Even if your why is bogus, and I'm like, that makes no sense. That's at least a discussion point when I get to interview you later. So it speaks heavily to me.
I probably have maybe a slightly different take on it. For me, I don't disagree with that. I just have I guess a default filter when I'm looking at resumes. For me, it is more about what you did. Because then I'm making mental notes of the questions I want to dig deeper on to get to the why and the how. I find it a little challenging to keep a resume to a page, which I like to try to do, if you're getting too in-depth with anything, because then you're either focusing on only a couple things, because you're obviously taking up space. So trying to find the balance between, I guess, brevity and keeping the resume brief is pretty valuable to me, because you don't have a lot of time for a person when they're looking at your resume. And then the cover letter for me is the chance to speak to the company in particular. So you can write a resume that is your resume. You send that to as many companies as you're going to apply. But the cover letter is your chance to talk to that company in particular and say, I know you at least a little bit, and here's why I'm applying for here. So doing a little bit of research, understanding the games they've made, being able to speak anything, even high level, to like the points of, I like this aspect of your company, or I like this aspect of the games you make, I think is a good way to sort of stand out, because standing out purely on the resume is going to be a harder challenge. It's possible, but it's harder to do than the cover letter itself. That's kind of how I feel about it.
So really quick example, you're an AI programmer, you say you're on your AI program, you blah, blah, blah. Then you go into, on the same bullet point, this is what I did. Okay, nav meshing. Well, how'd you do it? Well, I used this algorithm, blah, blah, blah. You can fit that on a single bullet point.
Oh, yeah. Definitely.
And that's all I'm saying. If you can give me that, what and how, boom, that's awesome. That tells me so much more than I did AI, I did nav meshing. Like,
yeah, you definitely have to be somewhat specific and get into it a little bit, for sure.
Word.
I agree.
A person named Amanda asked, how are you guys able to teach kids that there's more to life than being just really, really good looking? You can't. There isn't.
Right, you just can't.
I just wanted to call out Amanda because she's totally answering questions that people are asking you, Will, in the chat. So thank you, Amanda, for short-circuiting the mod conversation so that we can move on to other stuff. JD asked a really good question. What are some books or reading materials you think of when you think game design? Do you guys have any books or anything that you recommend?
Art of Game Design by Jesse Schell. That's my first recommendation to anyone.
Yeah. Level Up by Scott Rogers was good to me. It's really good for budding designers, and honestly, I read it a couple times a year just to remember the little things, because I get so into complicated systems and scripting now, and just to go over the fundamentals again is a great refresher, and that book nails it. And in the back of that book, there's a ton of like design resource, like documentation resources, all kinds of stuff. So Level Up, yeah, check it out.
as a general like foundation grounding, I think the design of everyday things is very much worthwhile. It's not specific to games in any way, but it's good.
Did you say the design of everyday things? Dang it! You took mine.
And
I just ran in the other room to grab it. No, that's a great book. I have 3 that I think of, and that have, well, one hasn't helped me as a designer because I haven't been a designer since it's been out, but Creativity Inc. is just an incredible book about creative creation, and I highly recommend that. This book, A Theory of Fun, by Ralph Koster, is awesome because it makes you realize that what you're doing is meaningful, even if you're just making fun for people. And then I did most of this book. It's Challenge for Game Designers back when I was a game designer by Brenda Brathwaite and Ian Schreiber, who are both incredible people in the game industry. And basically, it's just a bunch of designs. Or like design challenges. So you read it and it's like a lot of it's making board games, but it's still applicable to just getting your brain in there. And so I went through like that book over a year, just doing them on the weekends. So those are all great book recommendations, everybody. Anybody have any more? I have to go grab things. I'm sorry.
One more. Jeannie Novak has her Game Development Essentials series that she's been doing for like many years now. And she always co-authors it with some specialist on that topic, and that Game Development Essentials book is on that topic, so there's like a dozen or more of them now. But when I was in grad school, I read those a lot, and they super helped me out. Covered audio, art, every specialization you can imagine, she had a book on it, and it was high level, but it gave me enough to where I could communicate with those disciplines way better than I could have if I were ignorant on the subject.
Cool. Sorry, I had the next question queued up. Again, JD asked, how does the job of a game designer interact with programmers, with artists, with producers? Do you find yourself interacting with them on a daily basis?
That is the job. like literally, so much of design is communication and working with all the other groups to help make sure they understand what we're trying to make. And sometimes that's documentation. It's usually conversation, but like. And like Will kind of touched on here just a second ago, like having a base level understanding of what they do and how they do it helps you know how to talk to them and to keep your ideas, suggestions, and things you want to accomplish in the realm of realistic, and which makes those conversations go a lot better.
By the way, Chris, I do know it's Brenda Romero now, but on the book, if you look for it on Amazon, I'm pretty sure it's still Brenda Brathwaite. That's why I said that. Unless it's been changed lately, and I don't know. Sorry, I'm trying to catch up on all the questions on the Google stream there. What questions do you ask or attitude do you look for when finding new talent? How do you figure out who is ready to work and who is ready to hang out and talk about work? Robert Martinez asked that question.
Can you ask that again, Grant? What was the first part? Because
what questions do you ask or attitude do you look for when finding new talent? Like, how do you kind of suss out if somebody's going to be a good fit for the team, if their attitude's right for it, if they're into the same kind of things as you are in regards to game development?
For me, I can't say that I don't have like a line of questioning or any particular questions. It is truly just conversational. It's kind of just getting to know. You have like that blink impression of somebody, and then it's like, okay, based on this, what am I going to follow up in terms of questions to try to understand a little bit more about how they think, the personality, because all of that plays in together, especially in large scale teams. Personality is such a critical component of a good hire that. At least knowing a little bit about that is like a prerequisite before asking any sort of like technical questions about capabilities of the job. So that's kind of like the first like baseline try to establish, and then from there, dig into one thing I'm always looking for is somebody who has a lot of self-starting initiative. So if they aren't working in games yet, what are they doing in addition to the bare minimum? What extracurricular things? If they're going to school, are you doing anything on the side? Just trying to get a feel for how much motivation they have, and I'm not looking for like. You spend all of your time working. Absolutely not. But it's just that kind of that attitude or that approach.
Yeah. So to support that, So I've always played MMOs, like my whole adult life, and so I've got like a gaming group that I run, and the biggest principle I learned from that is the whole cultural fit sentiment here. I can make you good at the game, so I can make you good at your discipline in game development, but I can't. I have a lot more trouble taking you from being a jerk to a really good person. That's much more challenging to do than make you good at a technical skill or your discipline. So when I talk to people, I always focus on, just getting to know you, because if you're a genuinely good person and I'm really feeling that you have the passion and the commitment to do things, I'll stay with you all the way through your mentorship and training and everything to get you where you want to be. But I don't have time to make you less of a jerk. So don't be a jerk.
Don't be a jerk.
Don't be an asshole. I did a whole talk at Full Sail called "How to Be a Good Employee or Not Be an Asshole," and it's up on YouTube on this channel if you would like to watch it. I just plugged myself on my own channel. That's really depressing. Sorry. I thought since we were still kind of talking about portfolios and stuff, Carpenter Sound Design had a really good question. He's a sound designer graduating from Full Sail. And he's building his portfolio in UME 4, but his question really is for everybody when it comes to portfolios. Would you rather watch a playthrough or take the time to download the playable build and play it yourself?
Video.
Video.
Time's precious. I want to see a video.
And regardless of time, there's a security issue at some points too. I'm not going to download an executable, and tons of people upload those. I'm not going to do it. If you have like a web build or something that I can play 5 minutes and fill the systems out, cool. But if there's not a web build, I'm not playing your game.
Yeah, I think it's good to have both, but I'm going to watch the video, and I'm probably only going to watch the first minute and a half of it, so put all the cool parts in the minute and a half.
The other thing that's really, I think, powerful with video is that there's so many like free software, even web-based software like WeVideo or anything like that, that's free to use that you can overlay audio on. So not only can you show it, but you can narrate it, which is a great way to help people understand what they're seeing, because you can watch a multi-minute video and be like, that looked cool, but maybe I don't know exactly what you did. And subtitles can do that too, but if you can take the time to just basically narrate your video, that's a really good way to have a big impact in a short amount of time.
Yep.
Yeah, for sure.
Sorry. If you have trouble finding software to record things with, and you happen to be on Windows 10 now, there's a completely free built-in system that I use all the time to record my stuff. And it records my voice, everything. So Google it.
Cool. Eric Mason asks, when inspiration strikes, how do you get your ideas down? He says, I usually have a notebook on me. I actually, so as I said earlier, I was a lead designer for years. I used to sleep with a notebook next to me because that was where I got all my ideas. I would wake up in the middle of the night and write them down. So just a notebook for me.
Yeah, I just use my phone. Google Keep is like my little, digital post-it notes. So anytime I have an idea or I see something that I want to remember on the web or something, I'll just save it there so I can refer to it later.
I always use a notepad. In fact, I looked absurd at times, but I almost exclusively wore cargo pants so I could fit pin in a notepad right here in like my left knee pocket. That's how I went through school, so I was always ready. But more recently, in the past year, I picked up a voice recorder, and now that I've gotten the hang of it, that's awesome. So I'm just like, bam, say something, and I'm out, and it works real well.
So Spencer asked, what's something that should be avoided in a portfolio? That's a good question. Have you guys ever seen anything that you were like, no?
Yes, but...
Well, I guess the question I would have, like the clarifying question would be, like in terms of content, I don't know of anything, but certainly the presentation of the content, because if the portfolio has like, text that sort of summarizes what's going on, obviously in the same way when you're talking about cover letter or resume or whatever, the language that is used can be very telling of a person's like personality or intention. If they're putting down other people, I fixed this because it was terrible, these people were dumb, that kind of stuff obviously in a portfolio is out of place. But if you're just talking the actual media content, I don't know.
I think usability is the big point here. If I see a portfolio that's like a blog format and it just scrolls and scrolls and scrolls, I'm out.
Yep.
So for me, if I can see all of your content within a couple clicks and you have a nice bar at the top or on the left side and I can navigate real well, you've got my attention. I'm certainly trying to give you my attention at least, but if it's any more complicated than that, if you can't design the experience that I'm having on your website, I am not going to believe you can design a game beside me.
All right, Trevor New York has a really cool question here. While designing, how soon do you test designs with players? How do you balance gathering feedback and iterating on design with production schedules? Which of you is the fairest of them all?
I think that question is kind of one of the biggest struggles for a game designer, because we as we're working on something, we want it to be in a state where someone can fully get it before we let them experience it. And the problem is, at that point, it's usually gone too far. And so any kind of feedback you get, you're then either going to be too hesitant to fix, or it's going to be too late to fix. So, like, something that we're doing a lot with the way that UX is being handled now is like trying to get people to see that experience as soon as possible, even if it's just somebody you trust. You know, it's like, hey, I know you're going to look past the cruddiness of this. You're going to look at the experience, and I know you're capable of that. Can you give me some feedback on this very early so I can see, am I heading in the right direction? Is there major changes that need to happen before I've gone too far down that road?
Cool.
Yeah.
Any other thoughts there, guys?
Well, I was going to say, related to that, I know personally there can be a tendency to want to, like Jameson said, keep it too close to the chest for too long, and you've invested too much in it. But even if you're, if you have, say, like a timeline, like a target, if you're like, I'm going to get it tested at this point, be mindful of how you're investing the time leading up to that. Specifically, focus on making sure that everything is, all the pieces are there needed to communicate the bare minimum. So some amount of conveyance, even if it's text on screen, because you're not going to have like time to record any sample voice lines or whatever. It could be whatever, depending on what the thing you're trying to get people to play through. But expecting people to be able to make the mental leap that you can make easily because you're designing and building something is something that you can easily ask way too much, and then that will affect your feedback. So make sure that you're getting the pieces in there to sort of like help guide the person who's going to be doing the play test through there, and invest your time there where needed instead of focusing on iterations on the thing that you care the most about. Make sure that it's as complete of an experience as it can be so that the feedback is the most valuable.
I really like this question from JD, especially for people just trying to figure out what they want to do in games. What are some of the pros and cons of being a game designer? Like, what are the easiest and hardest parts of being a game designer?
Jeez. I think pros is creative outlet, right? Like, you get to you generally own something, at least even throughout your career. The amount of ownership that you have, or how big the thing you own, increases as you move along. It's also a lot about communication, and I'm a people person, so like that's a benefit for me to be able to kind of like be around a lot of people. We're working on something together. That's cool. But communication is also the most difficult part, because people are trying to, like I said, no matter whether it's this little piece of thing that I'm working on that's a small part of the game, or if I'm a director that's holding the vision of the game, making sure that people understand what you're making is very stressful, because everybody needs to know how their piece fits into that, and making sure that that's happening can be a very, very difficult thing to do.
So I was in production, then I moved into design, and my favorite thing about production was how I got to communicate with everyone and support everyone and serve everyone and lift them up and enable them. And I didn't think about it at the time when I was transitioning to design, but I still get to do that, and I get to have creative ownership, and I get to implement my own things. So that's like the biggest pro for me, is it meets both my interpersonal needs in my profession and my creative needs and my desire to have something tangible that I can show at the end of the day. Yeah, I don't really have a con. It's awesome.
I'm a technical designer. I have no frame of reference here. No, I agree. I agree with both of those points. For the design portion, it is like Jameson said, the creative outlet is a really awesome thing. Even though sometimes it won't always feel like that, but then it can go very quickly from not feeling like that to that feeling coming back with just little subtle things you won't even expect, and it's just a really cool thing. And yeah, I completely agree that the communication is one of the most important and also can be the most challenging thing. And that as well will not always be that way, right? Like working with some people will be very easy, but the topic, so it's the people you work with and also the topic, and obviously the interplay between those that can make it challenging, whereas one time you might have a really easy experience and you're like, I got this down, and the next time it'll be totally hard, and you could be communicating with the same people, but just the topic has changed the dynamic. So just kind of being prepared to be as self-aware as you can be in those types of situations is the challenge, I think.
Cool. So Eric Mason asked a question that I think is probably most applicable to me and Will, which is, after working in the industry, how does one transition into a designer role? I'm a programmer wanting to get into design. So I transitioned from programmer to designer, and then I was designer, lead designer, and then I transitioned to technical producer. So I've done this a lot. Some would say it took me a while to figure out who I was or something like that, but really I just get curious and I wanted to try a lot of things. My transition to designer role was basically I just kept talking to the designer. I worked at a small company and there was only one creative director, and I just was constantly having conversations with him, and I was working on my own designs outside of work, and got to know him, and then finally just pitched one of my ideas. This is super rare. I worked at a company that was casual games, and we made a ton of small games every year, and so we just needed games to make. It wouldn't really happen at a AAA company, but I really had just been working on my design skills for a year and a half, and getting feedback from him, getting input from him, until finally he was like, hey, can you help me with this design problem I have? And I helped him, and then I switched, and I was doing both for a while, and then I switched full-time to doing design. So that's how it happened with me. I don't really know what advice there is in that, other than just keep working on your designs and communicate with people.
Yeah.
Will, did you have anything?
So again, I started modding about 2004. That's when I got my first PC. I turned 18 that year, went off to college, all that. So I finally had an avenue to do so, and I just always loved modding. I love modding communities. I love everything about content creation from the player level. And so for me, even when I was a producer or other jobs, I never thought I had what it took to be a designer. And so for me, what made me transition from production to design was me realizing I could take my hobby that I've done for years and I've loved doing for years and make it my real job. And I didn't have the confidence to make that transition until these guys, actually, literally these two people in here with me, not Grant. They were both at Full Sail. They were like, dude, you mod, you do cool stuff. Anyway, long story short, I got the vote of confidence I needed between them and my significant other and other close people, and I finally pursued it. So if confidence isn't your issue, then like Grant said, it's about just doing it. Just go do it. Start building your portfolio of doing a certain aspect of game design. Again, specialize. That would be ideal. And if you're already a programmer, man, like we were saying, scripting, that's the big thing. If you're strong at that, yeah, just come join the cool systems designers and do awesome system stuff. Do that.
A couple people asked about design blogs or podcasts. Are there any that you guys go to?
I haven't really found any. I spent time looking for like a good podcast, and like there's a lot of them that are industry related and things like that. But as far as like actual design, I have not found any. Maybe we should start one.
Yeah.
There you go. Just saying.
WorldOfLevelDesign.com taught me a lot, which isn't exactly that, but it was a good resource and community. And it's a really cool guy based out of Florida that makes a ton of tutorials for level design stuff. But yeah, again, WorldOfLevelDesign.com. But I don't know of one.
Sorry, I was speaking specifically to blog or to a podcast. That's what I was saying. I hadn't found any. There's a lot of good resources out there, web-based, to find.
Yeah.
I Google it basically. I know for a while, like when I actually got that book, Ian Schreiber and Brenda Brathwaite, now Brenda Romero, both had blogs, and that's where that book kind of had spun off of. They're older, but they're not outdated in any way, so they're worth checking out.
I also have a blog at jamesondurrell.com.
That was basically what we call a softball question, and I was waiting for you to finish, and I thought you were going to just not talk about that, and I was like, okay.
I'm sorry, I still don't know of any good ones.
Correct. Okay, so Christopher Pioli asked, what are good exercises and/or portfolio builders for game designers? Is there anything that even to this day you maybe exercise or get your creative juices flowing? Like I mentioned before, the challenges for game designers. I know that Chris knows Brenda, so he probably already has used that book.
This makes me want to talk about something we haven't talked about yet, and I'll keep this super brief. Game jams. Especially, Chance Ivey and his community management team at Epic Games, not a plug, this is real, they do game jams every single month in UE4, new themes and all, and they're amazing at it. And besides them, if you're in school, anything on campus, whether you're in school or not, figure out what's local. If you're at any big city, there's a chance you got an IGDA chapter, and there's a chance that there's at least a couple game jams a year, at minimum the Global Game Jam every last weekend of January. So, yeah, that's how I keep my creative juices flowing, and side projects and stuff. But game jams are where they spawn.
One thing that I do, this might be a little different than what's being asked, but I really enjoy having conversations with other designers about other games. So, like, I do this with Will a lot, actually. I'll be like, hey, talk to me about, multiplayer level design as a general topic. Or talk to me about this feature in this game. Let's have a discussion about, like, why did they do this? Why does this character do that? Why is this more powerful than that? How is balance created? Those kind of conversations get me thinking about, like, the inner workings of something, and it may spark something inside of me with something I'm working on, or plant a seed there for the next time that I'm working on something, so I have that bit of knowledge kind of stored there.
Yep.
Yeah, I agree with that. Either conversationally, I think conversationally, like Jameson's saying, it can be the most powerful because you're getting additional perspectives. But even just doing on your own, sort of like pretending you were going to write like a system breakdown, or like basically I'm going to take this game I'm playing and this particular aspect of it, I'm just going to break it down and understand how it works, what I think the motivations for the designers and the decisions they made were, just kind of going through that as an exercise, even if you never use what you put down on paper or digital or whatever. It is a good mental exercise to go through and breaking it down, because, like, say in the portfolio setting or the interview setting, if somebody asks you to break down a feature of a game that they've built, in their library of games, you'll be more comfortable and confident to do that if it's something you've done as an exercise before. Even if you're having to think about that particular one for the first time, you'll kind of have a pattern of how do I break down these problems? What are the things I'm going to be trying to answer? I think that's really helpful, especially in the interview stage, because it's pretty common for somebody to ask you to, like, analyze a game that they've made, or say, what did you like about this, what did you not? And then based on your response, they're going to drill in a little farther. So being able to do that mentally and articulate it pretty clearly is valuable.
All right, so I'm gonna hold you guys for a few more minutes here, because there's some questions here I think that we can answer fairly quickly that are going to kind of close out things. If you asked a question and we didn't get to it, I do take all the questions that are asked and kind of put them into a backlog, and we'll try and answer it either with a different group in the future, or if you want to ask it on the Facebook page, somebody might answer it there. So, real quick, just one or two quick sentences from Darkman X. What is the specific skill or design that you picked up you didn't necessarily know you had before being a game designer? None? You knew all your skills already?
Well, so one I can that I picked up along the way. was specific to combat and how that relates to technology, specifically client network type technology. So there were things that both through school and in the first job that I kind of had in my mind and had learned and tried to absorb from the people around me that had a lot more experience about good combat and stuff like that. And then when I went to work on the DC Universe project, and that was an MMO, server-client relationship, it pretty much obliterated all of the rules that I had come to like be like, oh, I know how to think about this or whatever, because it all had to change based off of that. So that was a big thing that I learned about how to sort of like separate out what were the parts that were specific to a type of technology, and what were the things that were just purely experiential based and you have to hold on to figure out how to redo in that architecture. So that's something kind of technology specific, but that's definitely something that has always stuck with me as like, wow, that was a big moment where I realized I have to change the way I'm thinking about something that I already thought I had a pretty good hold on.
For me, competitive gaming is what prepared me to be a game designer without me ever knowing it. I'm a very competitive guy. I love all genres that hold any aspect of competition. And I'll just use the popular first-person shooter genre really fast. You know, between the weapons, between the movement speeds, between the design of the levels, the timers on weapon spawns, all of it. You know, I memorized that stuff. I took it super seriously with my team. And anyway, that speaks to both systems and level design like immediately without me realizing it. Like I understood competitive multiplayer level design because of how much I played it and researched it, and I began to understand systems and balancing from not only playing the game but always reading the patch notes and really trying to reverse engineer the decisions of what those patch notes entailed, whether it was a shooter, whether it was an MMO, whatever. And that certainly made me start thinking this way long before I realized it consciously.
All right. Keep going. Keep going.
I was just like, it kind of goes back to what we talked about earlier with playtesting. I think that is an area that you can actually kind of grow in. It's always going to be valuable to get the playtesting as much as you can, get that UX feedback.
Yeah.
But if you really pay attention to those sessions and you monitor those, you will pick up on things, repetitive things, where you're like, I need to start including that into my first iteration so that I don't get that feedback, you know, the very first time I do a playtest for a new thing. So treating those as a valuable resource to learn how new players with fresh eyes approach a problem or approach your design, you'll start to see cracks that you can fix now on a first pass instead of getting that feedback. So that's something that I had to learn.
I was going to say UX, just UX in general, all types of UX stuff. When I started doing game design, I had no idea that there was even a thing called user experience. So that was the big one for me. Which design of everyday things is great for that.
Yeah.
So kind of two more portfolio questions here that I think are really good. How important is an artistic background for a level designer? Is the ability to model texture and other art capabilities mandatory, and how are they helpful?
Nope, not necessary. I don't have any of that. Like, really, it's about thinking spatially is what's important. And as a matter of fact, I try to keep my levels as ugly as possible when I'm building them, because I don't want people to think that what I'm doing visually matters, because I'm not the expert in that. But you know, like being able to texture and model at a basic level, all those skills are good to have. Like if I can make something more representative of what I need in there, that stuff can be good and it can be valuable. Especially if I need this thing, nobody else has time to make it. If I can make some rough version of it and get it in there, that's good. But it's by no means required.
Yeah, I don't think there's much to add to that. If you can block stuff out into kind of a 3D space and a relative idea of what it is, keep it ugly, because then other people will want to come fix it. I always put the most annoying sounds I can find in my prototypes so that other people can fix it. Also on portfolios, do you look at a whole example, or do you really like to see the way the presenter implements the pieces to get to that whole? Is the end result or Gestalt implementation the focus? That was Tony, and the last one was from Ganesh. Sorry, I forgot to say that.
Do you have that?
I do have thoughts. So for me, just a video at the beginning that shows the final product I want the equivalent of an executive summary, and then if I care about the details, provide me that afterward. So whether it's a video, like maybe like a video, quick bullet points, telling me the high-level stuff, that's what I want to know so I can get the idea of what's going on. You can provide the rest, and I think that's the most respectful thing to do to the reader, is give them the final product and then explain it backward from there.
Hold on, sorry. There's some streaming issues here. My video disappeared. Okay. Well, we'll do one more question and then we'll wrap it up. And if the stream broke, the stream broke. Whatever. Ever had a design that you were excited about only to have it shelved or rejected? How did you deal and move on?
It happens all the time.
It does happen all the time.
I mean, so at a broad level, we're in an industry where projects get canceled, people pull funding, all that kind of stuff. I've worked on many things that have been canceled entirely, but even just at an individual level, there's a feature that I'm working on that I'm really stoked about, and maybe even everybody's stoked about, but because of what it's going to take to complete and the time we have left, we can't do it. Or maybe it's just literally that while it's good, it doesn't fit within the vision of the game, and I need to rethink it. Like, there's those kind of things happen all the time.
Yep. Plus one.
Yeah.
Yep.
I think one of the hardest things I had to learn as a designer was that a lot of your ideas are not good, and sometimes your ideas that are good aren't feasible, aren't going to get done. So don't become so attached to something that you can't cut it.
Yeah, I have a easy statement or mantra that I've always kind of held on to, is that there are very, very few great ideas, and there are there are very few great ideas, lots of good ideas. Most of the great things that people play started out as good ideas that became great only through iteration.
Yep.
Mm-hmm. And so expecting to have a great idea that translates to a great experience, you probably should stop trying to even think like that and think about what is a good foundational piece that I can iterate to something that is great.
Very true. All right. So before we end here, I'm going to give you each like 30 seconds to say any final thoughts or anything that you would want to tell somebody trying to become a designer. Jameson, start with you.
You know, I think the most important thing is to design, right? Like, that's one of the first things that Jesse Schell says in Art of Game Design is, how do you become a game designer? You say, I'm a game designer, and you just do it. Like, it's one of those things that like we've mentioned before, it's going to be bad at first, but do it. And there's tons of resources out here now. Like, when I started school 15 years ago, there were no resources. Like, there was nothing. So, like, these days, like, there's everything out there. There's all the editors, there's tutorials, there's books, there's everything. Just, like, start immersing yourself in it, actively doing things, sticking with it, and just start doing it.
All right, Rusty, what you got?
Yeah, I mean, it's a lot of the same thing that Jameson's saying. I think that because of the resources that anybody has at their disposal, it's really about just getting in and doing it. Like I was saying earlier, I think it's really valuable to have that kind of, self-starting but also finishing mentality. And so the resources are there. They're readily available, both in terms of building something and learning something. But don't forget that, as Jameson was saying, the design is part of it. Like, you have to think about both sides of it if you're wanting to become a designer. So figure out how to build the thing, but don't get so focused on building it that you're not trying multiple different things out in terms of design. So try to find the balance between going through different designs, different problem sets, and then also take advantage of the resources that are available to you and implement those in a demonstrable way so that you get portfolio out of it, you get a foot in the door, whatever it is. You get the practice and the outcome that will give you a potential.
Will?
So Rusty said everything I had planned to say in these last 60 seconds. So the only other thing is, we come together to do this because we love what we do, and we believe in you guys, and that we can certainly help. So please make sure, and sorry if this is something you can say anyway, Grant, but please make sure to comment on this Facebook group, continue to ask us the questions. We're here because we want to be here. And we certainly know you have what it takes. The fact that you're here shows that you already have the passion. If there's technical questions, we can help you find the right resources. If there's more of an intangible kind of question, interpersonal question, whatever, we're here to help. So please don't hesitate to post here or reach out to us individually if there's something we can do to help. Again, that is why we are here.
Yeah, well, that kind of does sum it up. So, feel free to ask questions on the Facebook event. All these guys have easily accessible different channels that you can contact them through that you can find just by Googling their names. Luckily, all of us have fairly distinct names. So feel free to ask questions. Thank you all for being here. Thank you guys for being part of this panel and giving out some awesome advice. And that's it. See you all next month.
Bye.
Later.